Hello, everybody. My name is Denny Sargent. I will, at the beginning and at the end, give my URL so you can go there, because I'm going to have all the notes to this lecture on my blog there, which is called Feral Magic. I'm at dennysargentauthor.com. I like to put my notes there so people can take a look at them if they're interested. Today I want to talk about Thelema and Ma'at. I think the two are intricately connected, and I have been doing a lot of research on this and found some very interesting things. Some I knew, some I didn't know. So for those of you who don't know me, I have written lots of occult books. I've been involved in Thelema since I was 17, which I realize today is almost 50 years that I read the Book of the Law and realized that I was a Thelemite, and my small group of pagans and witches also agreed, and we started doing Thelemic magic in our circle and going to various events. I'm also a tantric, initiated in two sampradayas, two lineages, and I'm a pagan. I'm a third-degree Welsh trad witch, and I am eclectic, apparently. I'm also the elder guardian of the Horus-Maat Lodge, so I have skin in this game, and I'm a little bit invested in this conversation. But I had a great time actually researching this stuff. And one of the things I did was reread the entire Holy Books, which was really, really powerful thing for me to do. So that alone was fantastic. So let's talk about Ma'at. Ma'at is misunderstood. My master's degree is ancient history, and I did a lot of Egyptian work. Ma'at can mean lots of things. Generally, it means truth, balance, justice. These are the terms you see a lot, which you also see in a lot of the writings of Aleister Crowley and in the Book of the Law and in other holy books. So I start to, when I look at some of these holy books and I look at some of Crowley's work and I see truth and justice and balance being discussed, I automatically feel like Ma'at is involved in this. So I'm going to start by talking about references from Crowley's work, connecting with Ma'at, and then I'm going to talk about Frater Achad and his contribution to Thelema and to the OTO, and then of course he veered off, but he had a lot to say about Ma'at, and I agree with a few things and some of them not so much. We'll talk about that. And then I want to talk about other organizations that are primarily focused on Ma'at as an adjunct to Thelema. And I'll end by talking about the Horus-Maat Lodge and Nema, because Nema was a very important, powerful person who was a very strong Thelemite, but also felt that it was time to focus on the next thing to come while we survived what's here. So let me begin. This is Ma'at. She's wearing a feather. Often it's considered an ostrich feather, sometimes white. The one I'm wearing is white. This one is often blue or black. But Ma'at, interesting enough, does not have really temples in Egypt. You rarely see images of her. You almost never see statues of her, because she is everything in Egyptian culture. One of the things that Egyptians used to say is, especially when they were contemplating the afterlife, is, I am of Ma'at, I am not of Isfet. Isfet means untruth, lies, unbalance. So the concept of Ma'at was far more important than any of the gods in Egypt, because from Ma'at, everything else branched. Ma'at in the Egyptian world was the right way things should go, was truth, justice, balance, but also the correct way things should go so that everything else in the universe and all the gods could be in harmony. She's a very cosmic concept that is far more intense than most of the other Egyptian gods. She is everything, and everything depends on her. And the pharaoh could not be pharaoh without the blessing and without channeling and being Ma'at. And so they would often use phrases like, the Hyksos invaded, Ma'at is gone from the country. And without Ma'at, everything falls apart, everything turns to chaos, and everything is gone. And when Ma'at returns, then everything is in alignment, is a good way to put it. The path of the sun is set by Ma'at. The path of the stars is set by Ma'at. So Ma'at is this universal cosmic a concept. It's more of an abstract concept. She's more of an abstract idea than say Ta'ert, who does these things, or a Horus or Tnemu, who does these things for people. She is all things and supports all things. The other thing that's really crucial about her is that she is, this is an unusual papyrus, because you have Ma'at here and Thoth here, or Tahuti. And Ma'at and Tahuti were husband-wife. Later, in the later kingdom, in the I guess the Middle Kingdom, she was equated as the wife of Seshet, who was a different goddess. But the oldest thing, the oldest dynasties, they are together, and it's very interesting. So she is just what guides the truth and balance, and then Thoth is the one who knows, who knows and brings knowledge. But this is the weighing of the heart, which is the most important event in every Egyptian's life, right? Where they die, and then their heart, or their ka, their truth, is balanced against Ma'at. Now, sometimes you actually see the figure of Ma'at in there. Sometimes it's just a feather, right? So, and it's interesting that they are looking on either side. They're guarding this process. Sometimes in later dynasties, you saw Osiris, there, and Amit and all that. This is an earlier one. And so it's really just about Ma'at and balancing Ma'at. I mean, you could call it karma, you could call it dharma, you could call it whatever you want, but Ma'at was the singular most important thing to Egyptians, that they were of Ma'at, and they had to face 42 judges in the underworld, in the Amenta, and they had to show that they had been Ma'at their whole lives. They had followed truth, justice, and balance, and had not gone off. Otherwise, they ended up getting tossed to the demon god Amit. So I like to start with that, just because when we're talking about it, we're not talking about, oops, I didn't want to get to him right away. I'm going to just go back one. We want to talk about Ma'at as a cosmic force. As a member of the OTO, as someone who's been a Thelemite my whole life, I see Horus as a force, not, force and fire, not just a god who did certain things or manifested as certain things like the pharaoh. And Ma'at also is a kind of force, a cosmic force, almost part of physics, the way Ma'at is described. So let me talk a little bit about some of the things that I found going through the holy books. Liber 231, it says, also the lady Ma'at with her feather and her sword abode to judge the righteous, for fate was already established. Now that's actually something that's very interesting to me, and I contemplated that for a while. So it says the feather and the sword, which is not uncommon in the kind of situation you just saw. The feather representing the truth, justice, balance, but the sword also representing truth, justice, balance in a more decisive way that is a little bit harsher and a little bit more intense. In other words, the general idea is like, if you don't follow Ma'at, if you don't go the way that things should go, the sort of cosmic justice of the world, then the sword will take care of you. I mean, then you're going to be taken out, or you're going to be judged negatively. My favorite line that really jumped out with Ma'at was from Liber Ash, which is, for two things are done and a third is begun. Isis and Osiris are given over to incest and adultery. Horus leaps up thrice armed from the womb of his mother. Harpocrates, his twin, is hidden within him. Set is his holy covenant that he shall display in the great day of Ma'at, M-A-A-T, which stands for, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's an anagram. But the fact that it's Ma'at is very important. That is being interpreted the master of the temple of AA, or there it is, whose name is Truth. So this is one of the few holy books that I've found that has any reference at all to Ma'at. And it's very interesting how it lines up there. So York, writing to Achad, and actually, let me see if I can just show you what book I'm referencing. I guess I didn't put the book in. But there's a book that I got a lot of things from that were a lot of correspondence with Achad about Crowley, and then when Crowley died, about lots of things, about the OTO and about Thelema and about Kabbalah and about a lot of the things that Achad did. And I think it's important to note that Achad rose quite high and very quickly in the esteem of Crowley, and Crowley named him as his magical child. And then later there was a falling out. But he discovered sort of the secret name of the Book of the Law. It was originally called Liber L. In Achad's book, Liber 231, he gave a quite complicated but very succinct discussion showing that it should be AL, not just L. And that was something that Crowley accepted and sort of bestowed upon him a great amount of positive praise and saw him as moving up in the AA. And there's a lot of the conversations that are happening in this book that Staley just put out, and it's just a collection of all the conversations they were having. So this is a quote from that book. Afraid, I assumed that when you discovered the word for the Aeon of Ma'at, you automatically assumed the grade of Magus. You seemed to question whether AC ever attained that grade because he never received a new word. I therefore assume that you have claimed the grade with the word. So this was a very serious conversation that was happening with some of these top people, and this is a reference. This is York writing to Achad, and at this point, York was running. I believe he was running a large chunk of the OTO, and he was deeply involved in the AA. So this is where things sort of got slippery with them. Is that AC Crowley had a word for the Aeon, and when Achad got his revelation that the Aeon of Ma'at was coming, he did not have a word. He did not utter a word, even though he claimed he was master of the temple. And at first, Crowley accepted that he had attained that, and then came back and said, "Wait a minute, I don't know if you have or not." So it's kind of interesting. And his reaction was, there is no word because Ma'at, it transcends this. Whether that's real or not, or whether that's something that's important or not, is something to be thinking about. In Liber Tazadi, thus shall equilibrium become perfect. I will aid my disciples as fast as they acquire the balanced power and joy, so faster will I push them. There's a lot of comments like this that talk about equilibrium, that talk about balance, that talk about truth and justice. And every time I see that, I feel like Ma'at is an influence here, and I'll come back around to why I think that. Crowley's motto was V, right? V veri venusium victus vici. By the force of truth, I have conquered the universe while living. The fact that he chose that word truth, I also found very intriguing, and I thought that he was, if not consciously, working with Ma'at here, he clearly is working with Ma'at. He's identified on a very high level with truth as being the most important thing, and that every Egyptian would agree with that. In the first place, it announces unconditional truth, but in the second, it is careful to state that the magical formula or system of principles on which the practical part of the book is based is not an absolute. We're talking about Al here. Book of the Law, is not an absolute truth, but one relative to the terrestrial time of the revelation. This is important because Crowley, in several places, said, I know what's happening with the Book of the Law in terms of this Aeon, but everything has to do with the timing, And you'll see, I have a comment where he was asked about the Aeon of Ma'at, and he said Ma'at can wait. Was his reaction. So it is a strong point in favor of the Book of the Law that it makes no pretense to settle the practical problems of humanity once and for all. It contents itself with indicating a stage in evolution. This is from the introduction in the Holy Books of Thelema, and that made perfect sense to me. So again, now we're referencing the idea that there's different aeons, there's different, and that the Aeon of Ma'at is ostensibly in the future, or theist as he called it. And the Aeon of Horus is what is what he's most concerned about and what he's talking about. And he's basically saying, that here and now, we're dealing with this now. What's happening another time is not as important or intense. So in Liber vel causae, deliberately, therefore, did he take refuge in vagueness, not to veil the truth to the neophyte, but to warn him against valuing non-essentials. Again, the word truth there. Wherever I found the word truth dropped, I had an interesting thought about it. Like, why truth? Why not something else? Why not loyalty or trust? But truth shows up a lot. And then these are both from Liber B vel magi by a magus, this writing made known to the mind of a magister. The one uttereth clearly, and the other understandeth, yet the word is falsehood, and the understanding darkness, and this saying is of all truth. And again, that drop there, just lit when I put on my Ma'at glasses, just lit up. Let him beware of abstinence from action, for the curse of his grade is that he must speak truth. Now that is almost pulled directly from Egyptian texts. That to speak truth is not just that you say, like in our language, truth. It means to be ma'at, right? Like if you not like honest and truthful and just and all of those things. If in Egyptian texts, if somebody says, oh, he spoke ma'at, or he was ma'at, that means the person is speaking truth. And the fact that that's laid right here for the curse of his grade is that he must speak truth, that the falsehood thereof may enslave the souls of men, I thought was really fascinating. So in Liber Portalucas, we shall bring you to absolute truth, period. That's verse 17. Absolute light, absolute bliss. But truth comes first, before bliss and light. Yea, verily, and then in 13, yea, verily, this is the truth, this is the truth, this is the truth. Unto thee shall be granted joy and health and wealth and wisdom, when thou art no longer thou. Now, this one I actually had a lot of meditation on. To say, this is the truth, this is the truth, this is the truth 3 times is something that you often see in Egyptian documents. He is of Ma'at, he is of Ma'at, he is of Ma'at. Saying it 3 times is emphasis. So I just thought that was really fascinating too. We learned that, and this is a quote from Crowley's The Confessions, we learn that Horus will in his turn be succeeded by Thmait, the double-wanded one. She, right? She who shall bring the candidates to full initiation, hold that thought too, full initiation. And though we know little of her peculiar characteristics, we know at least that her name is Justice. Okay, so doing a little digging, the mast comes from the Greek Themis. Themis is identified as Ma'at. Within people comparing Egyptian religion and Greek religion, say, oh, Themis is Ma'at, and Themis has a lot of the same descriptors as Ma'at. So in a couple of other places, it was clear that Crowley knew that Ma'at was Themis, but didn't use that very much, or theist, which I think was a Golden Dawn thing, actually. Not long before Crowley's death, okay, this is a comment by Kenneth Grant. I guess, warning, I was in Kenneth Grant's OTO in the 70s and 80s. Don't hate me. And this is a quote from Kenneth Grant, but it was about Crowley and about meeting. And he hung out with Crowley a lot before he died. He and Crowley were constantly corresponding. He wrote, not long before Crowley's death, I asked Crowley when Ma'at's Aeon would dawn. World War II was grinding to a halt, and contrary to the spirit of general rejoicing, Crowley declared that the war had not yet begun, exclamation mark. And how true was he? He was referring, of course, to turbulent years ahead as the Aeon of Horus, inaugurated by his receipt of the Book of the Law in 1904, really got underway. A little abashed, I asked again when he thought the Aeon of Ma'at would appear. His reply, Ma'at can wait. Which is legit, right? I mean, he was where he was, and he had uttered the word of this Aeon, and here he was. But this is one of the few things I found where he literally talks a little bit about the Aeon of Ma'at, but he clearly didn't want to get into it. And in another place, he basically said, "Who knows? We don't know. That's not. We're here and now. We're in the middle of this. We have to get through this." And this is a little bit on Thmait or Themis in Crowley's 1920 extenuation of the Book of the Law, published as a new comment in Israel Regardie's edition of The Law is for All. He intimates a fourth aeon based on the prophetic phrasing of Liber al vel Legis. Crowley writes, Horus-Maat is the dawning sun. He therefore symbolizes any new course of events. The double-wanded one is Themaist, of dual form as Themaist and Thmait, from whom the Greeks derived their Themis, goddess of justice. So he was perfectly aware of the connection. The student may refer to the Equinox, Volume 1, Number 2, pages 244 to 261. Themaist is the third officer in rank in the neophyte ritual of the Golden Dawn. So that's where he got that term from, because I was trying to figure out, what is this? I looked it up. What is this? I've never heard. I know Themis, but I didn't know this one. Following Horus as Horus follows Osiris. Crowley's 1920 extenuation of the Book of Law and the New Comment in Israel Regardie's edition of the Book of Law is for all, page 289. The familiar Egyptian form of the goddess of justice, who is the characterization of the fourth Aeon, is Ma'at. And it was the Aeon of Ma'at, or Ma'aion, that Crowley student Frater Achad, Charles Stansfield Jones, later came to advocate as prematurely succeeding that of Horus. Probably the most interesting and consequential outgrowth of this premise has been the Ma'atian magic of Nema, with its own inspired scripture, Liber Pene per number, and its independent body of magical techniques. But before I go any further with that, I want to talk about Achad. So we can't just push Achad away, because Crowley lionized him quite a bit and was very close to him, and it was maybe the closest quote unquote magical child he had, and he solved the riddle of that Liber al vel Legis needed to be al, not el, and he wrote an entire book about it called Liber 31. I don't know how many of you have seen it or not, but it's a really interesting book. So I want to talk a little bit about him and about what he did. I don't want to go into how he kind of lost it at a certain point, but he was very high up in the OTO, and he was very much treated well and thought highly of for a long period of time, and then he kind of lost it later on. But these are more quotes from Staley's book. But at the time of Achad's discovery, Crowley was overjoyed by the thought that he had produced a son, an heir magically competent to take his place in the Great White Brotherhood. Furthermore, he considered the strange, and this is a word I had to look up, concatenation, and it means a random collection of events that all come together. I love learning new vocabulary words. I teach linguistics. It's the best thing ever. Strange concatenation of circumstances as conclusive proof of the praetor human intelligence of Aiwaz, his holy guardian angel. Crowley saw in these events the full justification for his reorganization of the original Golden Dawn system and the acceptance of that reorganization by the secret chiefs themselves. The system had proved itself. Any person of average intelligence and capacity could, within a single lifetime, attain by its means to the highest spiritual eminence. So Crowley loved Achad, and I could go on and on about a lot of the stuff they said to each other. But where it fell apart was the fact that he postulated the Aeon of Ma'at coming, which clearly Crowley already knew that was a schema that he had been referencing. But then he started talking about declaring the Aeon of Ma'at. And after Crowley died, he said, "Oh, the Aeon of Ma'at has begun," and this is probably a fall from logic and grace. So supposedly, Achad came after Crowley and crossed above the abyss to be reborn in the Third Order, the Order of the Silver Star. Also, Achad did, in fact, discover the key of the Book of the Law in the word Al, which means existence or God. It means a lot of other things, too. When I studied Sumerian history, it means the personal angel. You could connect it with the Holy Grand Angel. And it's rooted in the same phonemic structure that like angels are named after, like Gabriel and Raphael. El, Il, and Al are all the same cognates, are all cognates of the same meaning. So of Al, but it was Al, but also La, which meant not or nuit. Also by the Tarot, 31 is equal to Sht, and the god Set or Shaitan. The formula Lashtal, in which compromises 3 times 31 adds up to 93, the sacred number of Thelema, Agape, and Iwas, or will, love, and the magical formula of their operations. Shit or Set. So these discoveries resulted from Achad's revelation concerning the number 31, which he obtained in the winter solstice in 1917, and which he delivered to Crowley in 1919. He accepted the key Liber Legis was changed to Liber Al Vel Legis. So Crowley accepted this as powerful and legitimate magical truth. And that at that point was started to see Achad as his magical child, and finally someone has come who is also going to be master of the temple, and when I die I can hand it off to him. And unfortunately it kind of went sideways, but so of course the word Achad means unity, adds up to 31, which is 13, which is 31 in reverse. And 31 is not only the number of Al. I could go on, but there's a lot of things connected with 31. And I don't think it's necessary to go deeply into it. These discoveries resulted from Achad's revelation concerning the number 31, which he obtained at the winter solstice in 1917. And in consequence, the title of the Book of the Law, originally Liber Legis, was changed to Liber Al Vel Legis. Frater Achad's account of his association with Crowley and his discovery of the key of the Book of the Law is embodied in Liber 31. So he helped open up obscure passages of the Book of the Law and Kabbalistically bring some interesting clarity that Crowley accepted as these things unfolded. Furthermore, Iwas, the name of the being who communicated the book to Crowley, also has the value of 93. Also, so does the word of the law, i.e. Thelema. So all these things sort of fell into place because of Achad's discovery. Although Crowley accepted Achad's discovery of the key of the Book of the Law, declaring that it opened the palace of the king. This is a Crowley quote. He did not accept Achad's claims to grades of Magus, 9 to 2, and Ipsissimus. Because of this, or so it seems, Achad endeavored to basically attack Crowley. So this was the point where they fell off. Because he really didn't have proof that he had attained that degree. He didn't utter his word. Even when he said, no, I'm channeling this Ma'at, but he did not have a word to channel. And so Crowley at that point said, something's not right. So in April 2nd, 1948, a year after Crowley died, Achad announced the Aeon of Ma'at, the Ma'at. And this is the symbol of the Ma'at, which I think is really nifty. I don't know if I actually want to join that cult, but if I was going to join that cult, I would join it because that symbol is so cool. And he has a lot to say about that, but just to talk about it a little bit. Precisely 44 years after the equinox of the gods in 1904 is when he announced that, okay, it's Ma'at's turn. When I was announced the inception of the Aeon of Horus, blah, 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 blah. For approximately 2,000 years, Achad named the new age the Ma'at, the Aeon of truth and justice, and claims that he prophesied its inception in a book entitled QBL, which is a really brilliant book he did on Kabbalah, but gets a little wonky in places. Some of you have probably seen the snowflake that he created out of multiple trees of life all coming together. Anyway. It's very trippy. So the Aeon of Truth and Justice, and claims that he prophesied its inception in this book. But if Achad failed personally to make good his rebirth in the Third Order, he did without a doubt discover the key to the Book of the Law. He did indeed come after Crowley, and he must certainly prove the efficiency of the AA system as reconstructed by Crowley along Thelemic lines. So there's a lot of feeling of like, oh man, he was so close, but he fell from it. The beginning of the discoveries relative to the new Aeon, upon which we entered April 2nd at 1:11 p.m., was made a little before the vernal equinox, when it was seen that the word manifestation, this is a quote from Achad, the word manifestation, which appears in the first and last verses of the Book of the Law, was the key of the rituals referred to in chapter 1, verse 20. It will be seen that the first two letters of the word are Ma and the last three Aion. The whole word, when rightly used, becomes a 13-fold star. And I'm not sure how that turns into a 13-fold star, frankly. Maybe it has to do with adding up the Kabbalistic meaning of each letter, which he called the 13-fold star diamond, which is true symbol of this new manifestation. And that was a letter from Achad to York. So he talked, this is another one to York, when he talks about the Ma'ayan. The manifestation of Nuit is in an end, taking this literally as Achad took it. The end that is both ends of the word manifestation yields Ma'ayan, which he claimed to be the true name of the Aeon of Ma or Ma'at. But notwithstanding the Kabbalistic proofs he amassed to establish the formula of manifestation, the fact implies virtually nothing in terms of practical magic. That he came very near the mark is shown by his observation concerning the word Aion, which he recognized as a Kabbalistic synonym for Aeon, to go, or the function of going. This was the particular characteristic of the gods of ancient Egypt, and it was typified by the Ankh strap or form, which is often shown with Ma'at. I'm sorry, that was not a quote from Achad. That was a critique, a conversation about what Achad believed. So what happened here? He got something. He got something really important and really powerful, and he had certainly worked his way up the ladder of initiations, and he had been accepted by Crowley as his magical son, and had found a key part of the Book of the Law. I mean, so he had done a lot. He was really honored by almost everybody in the OTO at that point, and even after Crowley died, a lot of these letters that I'm reading are from York and from a bunch of other high people in the OTO who are still working with him and trying to figure things out until he kind of went off the deep end and ran around naked around a building, summoning something, and got arrested. It's kind of sad where he went, but anyway. So he talks a little bit about the IHVH formula, and this is actually important. He saw this, and this is a letter he wrote to York, rather, that, let me get it right. Its manifest phase until humanity has transcended the ordeal of physical death by the cultivation of continuous consciousness. To recapitulate, I, the seed, H, primal, the matrix, V, the act, H, final, the manifestation. So that's how he saw the progression of the aeons, of the mother and the father and the son, Horus, and then the daughter. So I think he kind of got that pretty well right, but he insisted on calling it Ma'ayan. So I'll end one more thing about Achad. This was his York and a lot of other people that were writing him. He sent 7 of these documents basically proclaiming the Aeon of Truth and Justice. This is when he really nailed it down and said, it's coming now. It's now, you know. He said, praise to the infinite plenum of all perfection, an epistle of Ma'at to the crowned children of the new Aeon. This is the beginning of the manifestation of Ma'at and the word not known. Let us rejoice. The curse of the Magus is lifted. The silver star of AA shines. Chant is turned into design. There is success. Both old and new law is justified. Progress is before us. Let us keep on blessing and worship to the prophet of the lovely star. Let it first be understood, the plenum of the infinite perfection filleth the void. He is super unitary being, the great mystery, our God, and it is written, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with thine whole heart, and with thy whole mind, and with thy whole soul, and with thy strength, and all creatures for his sake as thou. And then he goes on and ends by saying, talking about Nuit and talking about that the Aeon of Ma'at has now come to pass. So what are we to make of it? Those of us who are deeply into Ma'at and work with Thelema and Ma'at think that, he made a great miss in saying, oh, the Aeon of Ma'at is happening now. But he got something right. He got something interesting. The people I work with now in the Horus-Maat Lodge, and there's many groups that are Thelemites, but who are working with Ma'at. And almost all of us have the general understanding that quantum physics is a huge part of what we're talking about here. And Nema got into this, and we've had many conversations of it, and a lot of ritual work we've done that was very intense, sort of proved some of it. That all aeons are happening simultaneously. In quantum physics, all time is present at the moment. It's very hard to wrap our head around. We see things sequentially. That's how these things have always been. So if all these aeons are happening simultaneously, then, for example, as a witch, I can draw from the Aeon of the Mother. And there are still many Christian churches that draw from the Aeon of the Father, and those of us who are Thelemites have accepted the Aeon of the Son of Horus. But that also means that we have access to the Aeon of Ma'at, because if all of these things are simultaneous, then Crowley was right when he said Ma'at can wait. He was focused on what was about to happen. He had just gone through World War II, and he knew all hell was going to break loose, which, in fact, of course, it has. But the fact that Ma'at is always there has been very, very potent in some of the work we've been doing, and we've proven it to ourselves by being able to access that particular current and that particular aeonic stuff. So I want to talk now about some of the the Thelemic-Ma'atian Orders. There are several. Most of them have kind of faded, and then I'll end with Nema, because I think Nema is the most interesting person to talk to and talk about. So there's the OAI. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the OAI. Probably not. They don't exist so much anymore. While the Ordo Adeptum Invisiblum, it's what they called, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it, was originally founded in England in 1979. The United States headquarters were established in Chicago in 1981. And this is somebody researching and saying, as far as I can determine, the OAI practiced a form of feminist Thelema, which was true. I used to correspond with them. So it was all women and one man, and they saw Ma'at as a feminist response to the overbearing masculinity of not just the Aeon of the Father, but also the Aeon of the Son to a certain degree. That this was they were reaching into Ma'at to bring a feminist perspective to things, and plus connecting with the energy of Ma'at, which once again is truth, justice, and balance, which is not a highlight of the Book of the Law in some ways. I mean, things are going to happen. Force and fire is going to happen. Good and bad people are going to die. I mean, this is the Aeon of Horus is going to be force and fire. It's going to be intense. It's going to be wild. Not that Horus is not Ma'at in his own way, but he has his task to fulfill, as it were. And the idea of bringing the Ma'at into this to sort of bring a little bit more balance, bring a little bit more truth and justice into the sort of fiery cauldron of the Aeon is kind of what they were doing, and it's kind of what those of us who are working with Ma'at are trying to do. None of us are denying the Book of the Law. In fact, we are all Thelemites. We're all serious Thelemites. Quite a few people I work with are in the OTO. But the question is, we accept what's happening now. Is there a way we can bring, via quantum physics and via magic, is there a way we can bring some of the energy of the Aeon of Ma'at into the present to cool things down, to help balance and justice work its way through all the stuff that has to be taken out, So that's sort of the bottom line. And they had a particularly feminist focus because they felt that, in fact, that it was really time for women to step up and do some serious magical work. And Ma'at became a very important deity form for feminists who were pagans and who were Thelemites. And it still is. You'll see Ma'at like at Oregon Country Fair. My friends help run the little spiritual space there. And they have a big image of Ma'at, and everybody walks in and they have some relationship to it. So I don't have much more to say about the OAI. The OAI seeks to rectify this by balancing the imbalance through women seeking to rediscover and reassert themselves, while male members minimize as far as possible their aggressiveness and dominance in turn. This will lead to a more directly visible equality and non-hierarchical structure within the group and in rituals. So they were really trying to do these sorts of things. The OAI teachings followed Aleister Crowley, Jack Parsons, and an Ohio woman known as Nema, and we're going to talk about Nema. So it was interesting to me that they were really into Jack Parsons. That went through me a little bit. I was like, oh, okay, Jack Parsons gets around. All right, so done with that. Let's move to Soror Nema. So I have a lot of skin in this particular game because Soror Nema was a very dear friend of mine and was probably the most powerful magician I've ever met in my life. And I experienced things with her. I experienced things with her and my group from New York, the Grove of the Star and the Snake, experienced things with her that we've never experienced anywhere else. So if a magus can do amazing things in terms of magical work, then it's very possible that Nema was a magus. Plus, she was like an Ohio housewife who lived on a farm. I mean, she wasn't, she wasn't a top intellectual or a lecturer, and yet this stuff started coming through her, and all of a sudden she was doing amazing things. And her books are incredibly erudite and astounding. So let's talk about Nema. Ma'at is this is a lecture she gave, and I'm just it's not very long. But I think it's going to cover up everything. It's going to cover everything that's important instead of me mansplaining Nema to you. Ma'at is the principle of netter or of truth, justice, balance, and honesty, personified as a young woman wearing a feather tucked into her headband. It's interesting. I forgot about that. Ma'at is also the principle of netter. I don't know if you know the word netter in Egyptian. Netter means God. It can mean lots of things, but it means a god. Like Neteru are the gods. So Ma'at literally was the underpinnings of everything, including divinities. She is sometimes depicted as a feather occupying a balance pan of the scale in the judgment hall of Osiris, a scale used for the weighing of the heart of the deceased. She is the daughter of Ra and the wife of Tahuti. Ma'at magic, which was what Nema called her particular brand of magic, of Thelemic magic, I want to stress, is a Thelemic system of self-initiation founded on the principles of Aleister Crowley's writings. There are differences in the details of the systems, though. Adaptations to the technological breakthroughs, political changes, scientific discoveries, and further visionary experiences of the past century. One major difference lies in the concept of aeons. The god forms for whom aeons are named reflect in their natures the general imagery or formula of the prevalent society of their time. Crowley saw, and I've bolded this one, Crowley saw the aeons in sequence, like most people do. I see them in parallel. The Aeon of Ma'at is not a replacement for the Aeon of Horus, but operates in concurrence with it. Likewise, the Aeons of Isis and Osiris are still in practice and in belief in various locations around the world, which actually makes a certain amount of sense. I mean, if Horus had fully come in, and if the Aeon had completely supplanted, we wouldn't be having so much Christianity and Islam. We wouldn't have the old isms, and we wouldn't still have witches and pagans, and so everything is intertwined. This was Nema's point of view. One of the things I think is marvelous about Nema, that she taught me so much, was that having a feminine perception of magic and of Thelema really changed a lot of my thinking and the way I approached magic and Thelema and Ma'at. And when she brought the Ma'at to the table, it blew us away. So my group was called the Grove of the Star and the Snake. We were all at that point members of Kenneth Grant's OTO. We were also witches, blah, blah, blah. And we operated in New York, and we did our own ritual work as we liked. We were doing primarily Thelemic rituals for a long period of time. We met her through the Cincinnati Journal of Ceremonial Magic, still one of those strangest titles ever for a magical thing. But in it, you know, we hung out at the Magical Child. We went to punk rock concerts. We were rioting in the streets against the Vietnam War. It was a great time, and we had that fervor of you know, that Horus kind of stuff. But we found this, and we read through the Cincinnati Journal of Ceremonial Magic. All right, and we read through it, and we got to some of her stuff where she started talking about this channeled book that had come through her, Liber Pene Praenumbra. And we read it and we went, whoa, like we all went, there's something here. Because we had seen a lot of channeled books at that point. I mean, you know, this was in the 70s, and everything was, the Magical Child had everything. And the Island Dialogues, if any of you have seen that, by Lee Heflin. And I mean, all these people saying, oh, I wrote the 4th chapter of the Book of Law. There was a pile of that stuff. So we're looking at her stuff, and we went, whoa, and we went zing. We started corresponding with her, and she started writing by hand, because there was no computers. She started writing by hand parts of her soon-to-be book, which was Ma'at magic. And I might as well just go right. That's Nema, by the way. And then her book Ma'at magic is that. But hey, Nema. I miss her terribly. She passed away about 2 years ago, and she was one of the most powerful, potent people I've ever met. Anyway, so she wrote us, she said, oh, you should do this ritual to hook up with the Ma'at current. We're like, well, all right. And she hand wrote it in this beautiful script she said she got from going to Catholic school, and about how to do this simple ritual. Ipsos, the word she uttered was the word ipsos, which means by the same mouth. And that the ritual is very simple. You light a candle, you sit in front of it with a feather. We would always banish, and do it, properly. And then you just chant ipsos, ipsos. And so it vibrates the feather, but it doesn't bother the candle. And you stare at the candle flame through it. Really simple ritual, right? I highly recommend you all try it. It's really crazily potent. And the first time we did it as a group, we had done some other, Thelemic stuff, and then we said, okay, let's make this the centerpiece, and we'll just do it and see what happens. And it was like this massive explosion happened in our circle. It was just like this whoosh, and we all went, whoa! And after that, we said, okay, who is this woman? And then we started corresponding with her a lot, and pretty soon we went out to Ohio and visited her. Anyway, to make a long story short, we went there in '79. We were this bundle of Horus. I mean, we literally were just this bundle of Horus. And we hit this black flame of Ma'at, and we got there, and there was this like bam. And we ended up doing like 5 days of nonstop ritual work. And I don't want to say this on the video, the other things we partook of, but it was a long, involved ritual practice where we all realized we were earthing something, like something was being born, and it was really intense. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. And we went out into the cornfield, and we invoked Horus. We used the Book of the Law, and we used, we know most of the chants, Achad dua to verbubia chefadudin afan nutoro, and unity out of Mashoda, I adore the mother of thy breast, supreme and terrible God. I mean, we had all this stuff down, right? And so we invoked Horus, and this incredible, and she was in there invoking Ma'at. And we suddenly got the image of the Horus-Maat Lodge, which is an inverted triangle of red, which Crowley identified as a symbol of Horus, with the black feather in the middle. And that's the head. That's what you see when you go to our website, which is Horus-Maat-Lodge.com. You can, and we have tons of stuff on that site. We've turned it into like a library of stuff. So at that moment, the Horus-Maat Lodge was born. And I don't want to go further with it, but I want to just talk about some more things that she had to say. One major difference lies in the concept of aeons, right? Crowley saw the aeons in sequence. I see them in parallel. The Aeon of Ma'at is not a replacement for the Aeon of Horus, but operates in concurrence with it. Likewise, the Aeons of Isis and Sirius, right? They're all there. So this is like a crucial change. And it's, Crowley didn't really know about quantum physics, or they started talking about it in the 60s, 50s, and 60s. So this idea that time and space is not sequential, which is a very mechanistic, Victorian era, Edwardian era way to look at things. It changes things. It changes things a little bit. We can talk about the Aeon of Horus and the Aeon of Horus simultaneously without, stepping on anybody's feet. It's just one is there, and we are physically here now in the Aeon of Horus, but that doesn't mean we don't have access to other things. In fact, before she died, she started talking about pan-aeonic magic. That all of the aeons are present, and why not use them? And she started doing a lot of work with pan-aeonic magic, working with all these forms. I use the Aeon of Bez as the nameless ancestral aeon extending backwards in time-space. The Aeon of Harpakrat is the wordless descent aeon extended forward into the future. You can order aeons in the number and formulation that best suit your needs, to the extent of your understanding of them. I began by thinking that Horus and Ma'at comprised the double current, but accumulating experiences show me that Ma'at magic is a pan-aeonic magic, thus a concept evolved within an evolving system. And then I'm not going to go on about quantum physics much more. Ma'at magic was created from the empty spaces around the works of Aleister Crowley. I love that line. I'll say it again. Ma'at magic was created from the empty spaces around the works of Aleister Crowley on the shelves of an occult shop called the Dawn of Light. In other words, she never once badmouthed or said anything negative about Crowley. She was a hardcore Thelemite, and her Black Moon just published her magical diaries, and she has some amazing stuff in there that's really potent and powerful. But she was a true Thelemic believer. But she didn't feel like what was coming through her was in any way contradictory. It was just something else. Crowley on the dawn of, in the early 1970s, there were a few books by Israel Regardie, Diane Fortune, Frater Achad, Kenneth Grant, but none of the range of works that I expected. I thought that magicians were supposed to discover their own systems of magic. Crowley said they were supposed to discover their own systems of magic, not to depend on his writings alone for their initiation. The discovery of one's own magic and the successful practice of it seems to me to warrant publication of it for no other reason than to share information with one's colleagues, which is I kind of what a lot of us do, right? We take some of these ideas of Thelema or whatever, and we expound them, and we create something new and share it with our friends. So this is how Ma'at magic started, her book Ma'at Magic. And then she goes, imagine a world without the internet and its foremost search engine prophet, Google, except for the small band of like-minded seekers. I could only presume that there were seekers out there. So you got to keep in mind that all this was happening before the internet, and it was all letters and piles of letters. But as things got going, once we founded the Horus-Maat Lodge, oh my goodness, then we had an e-list, that would go boo, it'd take 500 years to load, and pretty soon we had like 200 people who were all Thelemites who saw her stuff and said, wow, this is something new that I can fit into my work, into my magic. After a series of events and improbabilities, I had a vision complete with voiceovers. I love that, voiceovers. That was written as Liber penny per number, the book of the foreshadowing of the feather. Since incoming information is framed in the vocabulary of the receiver, and since I was immersed in Crowley's writings at the time, Liber penny per number language resembles his in style, which I called King James Biblical. I've since updated it into a longish poem called Feather Song. She rewrote it in just sort of regular vernacular. But I have to admit, I like the original better. Another factor in the early development of Ma'at magic was the entity called Natan, and this is where it gets sci-fi. Natan appears as an androgynous human with golden skin, hair and eyes, and with his right side as always in shadow. The shadow contains different things and different occasions, etc., etc. Who or what is Natan? Before I attempt a definition, I ask you to suspend disbelief in the relative realities this definition requires. So, how do I explain Natan? The vision that she had, the vision that I've actually participated in having, many of us who have gone through some of the stuff with the Ma'atian current have had very similar visions, which is this. Our planet and our species, well, the planet will probably survive. Our species may not, right? We are really and this is what Force and Fire, this is what the Aeon of Horus is about, is things might completely go. I mean, everyone could die. It's not so off track that, whether you're talking about an environmental collapse, or you're talking about nuclear war, or you're talking about, a biological plague. I mean, the human species is not infinite, and it can die. And through a lot of the work with Ma'at, we came to the realization that the great work in our world, the great work is the aiding and survival of the human species. That's why we're magicians. So what can we do? We can bring, and this was our general answer, was we can bring Ma'at, the truth, justice, balance, to the wild craziness of Horus, and somehow get through. Now, what Nema had a vision of, and I actually had a very similar vision, was that once you are able to sort of get into that headspace, into the Ma'atian time loop, that layer that is the quantum layer of the Ma'at universe, you realize that there are multiple paths the Earth can take and that we can take. This is not anything new. This is a basic quantum physics 101, right? That from this moment on, there are a number of possibility futures, and all of them are potential, and all of them in one reality or another exist, right? So our goal, and our general goal, has been, well, we know that there's one, and this was her vision when the quote unquote children of Ma'at and Ma'at started to come to her, and she started to channel this stuff. One of the things they said was, there is one tightrope, there's one path that's going to get you to where humanity achieves universal consciousness. And I don't know how many of you know Teilhard de Chardin or some of the other mystics who believe that in the far future, there's an omega point where human consciousness we will all have interrelated consciousness, and therefore not want to kill each other, or not want to, that we will have sympathy and empathy for each other in a greater way. So that path of getting to that point ends up at this entity she called Natan. I have a different name for it because I've had interrelations with it too, and that is the collective. This is where it gets really weird. That being is the collective consciousness of all humanity that's trying to make itself born. It's trying to make sure that we get to that place. Does that make sense? So if time and space, I mean, tachyons go backwards and forwards in time. If you have an end result of that particular time stream that is reaching back and saying, come on, you guys, you can do it. Just find this path, and you can achieve what humanity has always needed to achieve, which is human consciousness as a group dynamic, where we all literally see ourselves as one, and every religion says that. Every religion says we are all one, but the truth of it is problematic, right? But we have to break. I mean, Horus is here to shred everything so that we can get to the truth. We can get to the balance. We can get to where things are. So now I'm ranting and giving you a belief system, but all of these things are things I've experienced within the Ma'atian gnosis. And my group and I, we all went, holy moly. We actually use different words, but yeah, holy moly. This is something, because we were, we were in New York, we were punks, we tried everything. Like we were doing Golden Dawn rituals, we were doing this, we were doing that, we were doing this. You know, we belonged to Kenneth Friends OTO, but we hung out with the regular OTO people in town. They were all at the Magical Child, and we went to Gnostic masses. We did everything, you know. But this Ma'at thing all of a sudden did something utterly different than everything else we had been trying. It opened up sort of a lens to the future, which meant everything to us. Because really, what's the point of magic? What is the great work? And we all agreed that the great work is to try to help our species evolve. In her world, she calls the next step up Homo veritas, as opposed to Homo sapiens. So there were some things she specifically said. Natan sleeps in most of us, but is waking up, stretching and yawning in some of us. Natan is us and our children and our new incarnations, and also those ancestors of ours who lived in wisdom and helped our species survive and change. I was informed in the course of cosmic tours that a simple majority of humans, when awakened to our species consciousness, will pull the rest along with it. So it's a very 100 monkey effect. If you guys all remember the hippie thing about the 100th monkey, you get enough people and it tips things, and that's our goal. That's the goal of the Horus-Maat Lodge. That's it. That's the big secret, is trying to help the world survive. Natan isn't a god form in the classical sense of the word, although she might be regarded as such by mages in the devotional stage of initiation. Natan is a meta person and is our genus representative among other living beings. So I don't know if you know Louis Martinet. Louis Martinet is my good friend and is a voodoo priest and a lot of other things. In 1976, Louis Martinet and a small group named Bait Cabal published the first issues of Cincinnati Journal, and then it kind of spread. I could go on about our experience, but I think I've talked about it enough. 1979, when we ended up going there. So in 1980, 81, and 82, her farm, which she called the Abbey, Pangrove Abbey, hosted the Warrior Lord workings, gathering of about 30 to 40 Thelemite magicians to read the 3 chapters of the Book of Law in a ritual setting, hold lectures and workshops, display artworks, and engage in long esoteric conversations. It was fantastic. It was really potent and powerful. And again, this is still, the internet was like not really there at this point. But it was, we all sat in a farm and we all hung out and we talked and we partied and we read the Book of the Law, and it was really something. In 1983, while riding home from work, and this is her talking, I heard a silent but sonorous voice saying the thrones must be filled. The statement was repeated several times. This led to the working that we do in the Horus-Maat Lodge, which is called the 11-star working. We have 11 people, 11 adepts, each sits in a particular sphere of the tree of life, and it creates a circuit, and then we use that we have a particular focus with that energy, which is again to connect with Natan and to connect with Ma'at current and bring it forward for the good of all people. So the 11th star rite was also performed in Seattle as part of a celebration of the harmonic convergence. That was me. That was really fun. Ma'at Magic was published in 1985, and I received a number of letters, etc., etc. So I'll just show you this. So that's Ma'at Magic. I highly recommend it. I think there's a copy of it here. If not, I can donate one. It's really, I think, important for Thelemites to read. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to buy into it. But I mean, we read things every day that, we don't buy into. We read them to gain new information or knowledge or ideas. But every time I've handed to people who are like, oh, I don't know, this sounds flaky, they've read it and they said, oh, there's something here. There's something potent here. So if nothing else, I recommend that. That it's a different view by a woman who was an adept. I would say master of the temple. She was a high-level adept. And there aren't very many Thelemic high-level adepts like her that I've ever met. There were a couple, But I think it's super important that that it's a woman who is channeling this gnosis. We had long conversation about it, and I felt it was really important, and a lot of us do, because the Aeon of Horus is very masculine, and there's a lot, and things are happening now, and we're watching how gender is opening up, and all the things that were predicted in the Book of the Law by Crowley. But having someone bring in a purely, I don't know how to explain it, but a purely Ma'atian flow coming from a female adept, I just found to be incredibly potent and powerful. And it's funny because the Horus-Maat Lodge, unlike a lot of organizations, is more than half women, which is really, because somebody accused us of being sexist. So we did a survey, and it was actually more women than men. So that actually gave me pause, and I was like, oh, because I go to a lot of occult groups, and it's like mostly guys. So this kind of made me happy. If you're interested in viewing the Horus-Maat Lodge stuff, again, it's Horus-Maat-Lodge.com. And it's got piles of stuff, including Cincinnati journals and everything else. And there's not much more I have to say. I'll just add this. This was just published a couple of years ago. We are completely open source, and I'm not trying to advertise the HML. I just want to point it out if people are interested. We don't charge for anything. We don't have, we agreed, Nema said that we should really think of it more as a circle than anything else, and we shouldn't have degrees, and the people come in and do their work, and everyone's, so there's really we have very little actual physical stuff. But this is a book, and we're selling it pretty much at cost on Amazon for $20. And it's all the rituals and everything that we do. And so anyone can have it if they want it. We're not interested in trying to teach anybody anything else. Anyway, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Does anybody have any questions? Wow, is that good or bad? I didn't mean to drone on so long. No questions at all? Yeah.
I like that idea of different futures branching off. William Gibson's been addressing that in recent books, even on TV. And it makes it a lot easier for me to get my head around.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very funny. Like many years ago, I wrote a book many years ago, 1994. I wrote a book called Global Ritualism, which was a survey of magical practices around the world. And I was on a radio show with Art Bell, if you remember Art Bell. I know I made a show. I was on Art Bell's show. That was when I was young. And I was trying to talk about some of this stuff, and all of a sudden he had a high-tech guy come on who was worked for not Microsoft. He worked for Oracle, and he designed whole systems and everything. And we started talking about what we've just talked about. We started talking about like Natan and the possibility futures. And he was like, he started plugging. Goes, oh no, that's absolutely true. This is how the systems work, and this is what's happening. And I said, well, from my point of view, I'm like, duh, I don't know any of this stuff, right? And I'm like, well, this is what we're trying to do. And he goes, oh, Natan. And he finally had the moment. He goes, oh yeah, we're going to create an exoskeleton that will become Natan. It's going to be an entire web of interconnectivity around the planet. And that's the beginning of unified human consciousness. And I got goosebumps, right? I went, I don't know what this stuff is. I know. I'm like, okay. And then I went home and I was like looking it up, and I'm like, oh. So I thought that was like a connection with reality as opposed to my, what I was doing magically. And he just bought into it. He goes, oh no, that's going to happen. And then he talked about AI. This is like in 94, right? He started talking about AI, and that we're going to create an exoskeleton to help bring universal human unity and of consciousness together. And I'm like, okay, so that's good, right? Right, and he worked for Oracle, which, oh yeah, thank you, that's good. I don't think I ever pieced that together again. Anybody else have any questions they want to ask me? I know it's kind of a fire hose, yeah.
early on in your talk, you were talking about truth, and you were speaking to something that, to me at least, sounded like the difference between the notion of a truth that you say, right? So you have true and false statements about things, right? But then you were alluding to this other kind of truth, which is more like a truth that you are,
Yeah.
what you are, or even more basically a who you are. And I wondered, my question's very open-ended for you. It's how would you, like, for every spirituality, there's a way of walking it, right? A way of its truth, a way that what it is to be it, to be that path and to walk it. What would you say is distinctive about this path? Path of
Wow, that's a great question. What helps me a lot, what helped me put this together, because I spent a lot of time diving into this. It was really interesting and fascinating. And it got me to read the holy books again. Stepping back into the Egyptian worldview helped me understand this better. Because when we say truth, it tends to be ego-centered. Like, oh, I didn't lie to you, I told you the truth, you know? The Egyptian view of truth was that it pervaded all things. It was more like the Tao. And when somebody said, I am of Ma'at, that didn't mean that they spoke truth. It meant they literally were Ma'at and not Isfet, which means lies, but it also means something off or evil or wrong. And they would, and then, for example, when the Hyksos invaded Egypt and the whole culture crashed after the that period of time, and they took over for a while, and then there were warring factions, and it was just a mess. In all the Egyptian histories, they talk about, they say Ma'at had left the land, and I just thought that meant that Ma'at was this nimbus, this like the Tao, you know. It had that Egyptian culture. It was very hard to read. I spent a lot of time when I was getting my ancient history stuff to understand how, because the Egyptians had this view of things as existing and pervading, and we tend to think of things as coming from us or you, or we tend to think of things more mechanistically. And their view was that Ma'at was just simply the rightness of things. That when the king took the crown, he said, you know, that Ma'at is present, and I am merely the voice of Ma'at, meaning everything's fine. The crops are good, people are good, kids are getting born properly, are well, and that there was a way things were happening, you know, like it very much like the Tao, and that when things went cattywampus, when there started to be like wars or cheating or lying, then they had lost Ma'at, and it wasn't just one or two people that had lost Ma'at. Once Ma'at sort of got corrupted, then everybody lost Ma'at. So, I mean, think of it that way. You see our culture, you see what's happening, you see that we knew from in the 1950s, Exxon knew that oil and gas was destroying the environment, and they continued to do it. I mean, you see all these duplicitous things that happen, often for money, right? And it corrupted not just them, it corrupted the whole, Ma'at left the land, you know? And everybody feels that. It's kind of interesting. So it's hard for me to wrap my head around too, because I grew up in a Western country, but truth, justice, and balance were all one thing to the Egyptians. And I think within the Ma'at zone, when I'm in that Ma'at presence, which actually was last night, every new moon, all around the world, we have people all over the place. We all do a ritual. We all do the 11-star ritual on the new moon. And try to meet up if we can. But every time I'm in that zone, I understand it. And when I'm out of that zone, I'm back to being me, and I think of it individually. It's hard for me to perceive it in the sort of Zen-like manner that I think the Egyptians did. And I think it's important. I think it's really spiritual. And the one reason I went through and got a lot of these Crowley quotes from his holy books when he was in a truly transcendent state is that he often mentions truth and justice and balance over and over and over and over again, that as a kind of a huge river flowing through Thelema, flowing through his consciousness as a master of the temple, as a highly evolved person. I mean, I mean, look at his name, V, which is all about truth, and yet on a higher spiritual level. So I think he channeled Ma'at at those moments when he was transcending above the planes of the lower spheres. I mean, who knows? But that's just my thought. Putting this together really helped me see the Ma coming through Crowley, which was very interesting to me, because I didn't realize that he used those terms over and over, and it kept coming back up and up and up, you know. So anyway, anybody have any other questions? I can ramble obviously forever. So
the connection that Achad drew between Ma'at and manifestation, I thought was very interesting. That's a very Crowley way of looking at it. Is that the card adjustment, which depicts the woman with the balances, is a hieroglyph. As a whole, it's the totality, which is perfectly balanced.
I agree. It's interesting. I think so too. It's interesting that Staley and some of it's not called the Typhonian OTO anymore, but they have like a Typhonian order or something that kind of tries to continue on the stuff that was happening, but I think it's quite different. But he felt, and a lot of other people felt, that Ma'ayan was wrong, that it should be secret ion, secretion. He thought that secretion was the key word. And I still think Ma'ayan makes sense to me, because Ma is every goddess on the planet. I mean, Kali is Ma, you know, and Isis is Ma. I mean, the word, the syllable Ma is like every mother, every goddess in existence. So the Ma'ayan, I find, yeah, I think it works for me. He fell from it, you know, he didn't quite get there, but he saw something, and he channeled something, and it was potent. And we spent a lot of time talking about what we were doing with Nema's work and what Achad did, and seeing where he had fallen. And that he said, you know, he took the oath of the master of the temple, but he didn't utter a word. And there was a number of things that going up that ladder, that he didn't quite make, he didn't quite get. And so, anything else? No?
Oh, you mentioned surprise about Jack Parsons being tied up in this. You wrote an essay on Babylon where you interpreted her as like a feminist, like a figure of feminist liberation.
Oh, yeah.
That's what the
I know, I love that. I love Parsons. I mean, who can't love Parsons? I assume everybody's seen the movie. I mean, but he did something that we thought, when I was younger, when I was 17 and reading the Book of the Law and blowing up like a firecracker with all my friends, we loved Parsons, because I mean, he was like the total punk rocker, and he did what he wanted to do. I mean, he followed Thelema, but he followed Thelema in his way, you know, and it didn't always work out, obviously. I mean, we have Scientology to answer for, you know, but I think he was on to a lot of things, and his focus on Babylon was really, really important. And the, you know, his holy books that he transmitted, I have them, and I think they're really powerful and intense things. And he was somebody we talked about a lot when we were sitting around, and you know, Nema just felt like Babylon was sort of a reflection of Ma'at, in a sense, that Babylon was bringing Ma'at to women, or something along those lines. I didn't write it down. We were all too having much fun. So I don't remember everything that was said, but a lot was said. So, but yeah, we talked about her, we talked about Babylon, we talked about Parsons. But if you look at what he did in terms of rockets, and in terms of starting something that is, you know, APL is still around, right? I mean, he created something that will continue on and change the course of things. So that's powerful magic. Anybody else? I have absolutely no idea how long I've been doing this. No questions at all? Oh, thank you so much. Again, do it thou will shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. I very much enjoyed this. I learned a lot, so thanks.